Park Tae-ho sat alone by his small campfire, watching the stars appear one by one in the dark sky above. The mountains of Gangwon Province stretched endlessly around him, wild and empty. He had been camping here for 5 days now, taking photographs of eagles and deer for a nature magazine. It was quiet work, lonely work, but Tae-ho liked it that way. He was 32 years old and had no wife, no girlfriend, no close friends. His parents lived in Busan, but he rarely called them. He did not know what to say. His life was simple. He took pictures of animals, sold them to magazines, and spent most of his time alone in the wilderness. It was not a bad life, he told himself. Just a quiet one. The fire crackled softly as Tae-ho poured himself a cup of instant coffee. The night was cold, but his jacket was warm enough. He looked up at the stars again and thought about nothing in particular. Then the sky broke open. A streak of brilliant white light tore across the darkness, so bright that Tae-ho had to cover his eyes. The light moved fast, faster than any airplane, leaving a trail of fire behind it. Then came the sound. A terrible roaring noise that shook the trees and made Tae-ho's chest vibrate. The light disappeared behind a mountain ridge about 2 kilometers away. A moment later, the ground shook with a heavy impact. Orange flames rose above the trees in the distance. Tae-ho stood frozen, his coffee spilling onto the ground. His first thought was that a plane had crashed. He should call for help. But when he checked his phone, there was no signal. There was never any signal this deep in the mountains. He looked toward the flames again. If it was a plane crash, there might be survivors. They might be hurt, dying, waiting for help that would not come until morning at the earliest. Tae-ho grabbed his flashlight and his emergency medical kit. He did not think about the decision. He simply started walking toward the crash site. The hike took almost an hour. The terrain was rough, full of rocks and fallen trees, and Tae-ho had to climb over several steep ridges. The orange glow guided him forward, growing brighter as he got closer. The smell reached him next, a strange chemical odor that burned his nose and made his eyes water. When he finally reached the crash site, Tae-ho stopped and stared. It was not a plane. The object half buried in the torn earth was smooth and silver, shaped like a teardrop. It was maybe 10 meters long, with no wings, no windows that he could see, no markings of any kind. Strange blue liquid leaked from cracks in its surface, glowing faintly in the darkness. Small fires burned in the grass around it. Tae-ho's heart pounded in his chest. Every logical part of his brain told him to run, to get away from this thing, to pretend he had never seen it. But his feet carried him forward, anyway. The silver surface was warm to the touch, almost hot. Tae-ho walked around the object slowly, looking for an opening. On the far side, he found one. A section of the hull had been torn away by the impact, leaving a hole large enough for a person to climb through. He shined his flashlight inside and saw her. She lay crumpled against the far wall of the craft's interior, surrounded by broken equipment and more of that glowing blue liquid. At first, Tae-ho thought she was human. She had a human shape, a human face, human hair that was long and dark. But as he climbed inside and got closer, he saw the differences. Her skin had a faint shimmer to it, like silver dust had been mixed into her flesh. Her ears were longer than any human's ears, tapering to elegant points. And when Tae-ho carefully lifted her eyelid to check for response, her eye was not white and brown like his. It was solid violet, deep and strange and beautiful. She was also badly hurt. Deep cuts covered her arms, and a piece of metal was embedded in her side. Blood soaked her strange clothing. Though the blood was darker than human blood, almost purple, Tae-ho did not hesitate. He carefully lifted her and carried her out of the wreckage. Getting her back to his camp took 3 hours. She was not heavy, lighter than he expected, but the terrain was difficult, and he had to stop often to check that she was still breathing. Several times, he thought she had died. Each time, he found a faint pulse and kept going. By the time he reached his campfire, dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. Taeho laid the woman on his sleeping bag and opened his medical kit. He was not a doctor. He had basic first aid training, nothing more. But he had treated injured animals before, birds with broken wings and deer caught in traps. He told himself this was the same thing, just a creature that needed help. The metal piece in her side was the biggest problem. Taeho knew that removing it might cause more bleeding, but leaving it in could cause infection or worse. He made a decision, cleaned his knife with alcohol, and carefully cut around the wound to free the metal. When he pulled it out, dark blood flowed freely. He pressed clean bandages against the wound and held them there until the bleeding slowed. For hours, he worked. He cleaned her cuts with antiseptic that made her flinch even in unconsciousness. He stitched the worst wounds with fishing line, the only thread he had. He covered her with his jacket when she began to shiver. The sun rose fully. Birds began to sing in the trees. Taeho sat beside the alien woman, exhausted, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. Around midday, her eyes opened. Those violet eyes found his face and widened with fear. She tried to move, tried to get away from him, but pain stopped her. She spoke rapidly, in a language Taeho had never heard, her voice high and panicked. Taeho raised his hands slowly, showing her they were empty. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe. I won't hurt you." She did not understand his words, he could see that. But something in his tone, or maybe just his gentle expression, seemed to calm her slightly. She stopped trying to move. Her eyes remained fixed on his face, studying him with an intensity that made Taeho feel exposed. She spoke again, quieter this time. A single word that sounded like a question. Taeho pointed to himself. "Taeho," he said. "My name is Taeho." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she pointed to herself. "Yura," she said, her voice weak but clear. Taeho smiled. "Hello, Yura." Outside, the mountain wind blew through the trees, carrying away the last traces of smoke from the distant crash site. Somewhere far above, hidden by clouds and the blue morning sky, stars continued their eternal dance. And in a small camp on a remote mountainside, a human man and an alien woman looked at each other for the first time. Neither of them knew it yet, but the universe had just changed forever. The first 3 days were the hardest. Yura could barely move without crying out in pain, and Taeho had to help her with everything. He fed her small pieces of food, gave her water from his canteen, and changed her bandages twice a day. She watched him constantly with those strange violet eyes, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she did not understand. Communication was nearly impossible at first. Taeho tried speaking slowly, using simple words. But Yura only shook her head in confusion. He tried drawing pictures in the dirt, and that worked a little better. He drew a mountain, then pointed to the real mountains around them. Yura nodded. He drew the sun, then pointed at the sky. She nodded again. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Taeho was preparing breakfast, a simple meal of instant rice and canned tuna, when Yura spoke. "Food," she said. Taeho nearly dropped his pot. He turned to stare at her. "Food," she repeated, pointing at what he was cooking. Her pronunciation was strange, but the word was clear. "Yes," Taeho said slowly, amazed. "Yes. Food. This is food." Yura pointed at the canteen next to her. She had been listening. For 3 days, she had been listening to every word he said, and her mind had been recording it all, sorting through the sounds, finding patterns, building understanding. From that moment, her learning accelerated faster than Taeho would have believed possible. Every day, she learned dozens of new words. By the end of the first week, she could form simple sentences. By the end of the second week, she could have basic conversations. Taeho should have returned to civilization long ago. He had food for another week at most, and his photography assignment was already late. But every time he thought about leaving, he looked at Yura and knew he could not take her into the human world. Not yet. She was too weak, and she was too obviously not human. People would panic. The government would get involved. Scientists would want to study her. So he stayed. He caught fish from a nearby stream. He gathered wild plants that he knew were safe to eat. He told himself he was just waiting for her to recover fully. But the truth was, he did not want to leave. Yura was the most interesting person he had ever met. She was curious about everything, asking endless questions about the trees, the birds, the clouds, the fire. The strange little device he carried that could capture images of light. She was smart, far smarter than anyone Taeho had ever known, and she had a gentle way of speaking that made him feel comfortable. In the third week, she told him the truth about herself. They were sitting by the fire, watching the stars appear. Yura had been quiet for a long time, and Taeho sensed she was preparing to say something important. "My name is not just Yura," she finally said. Her Korean was imperfect, but understandable now. "I am Princess Yura of the Celestine Empire. My sister is Queen Nari. She rules many worlds, thousands of worlds, across what you call space." Taeho stared at her. "You're a princess?" "Yes, a princess of a very old family. My bloodline has ruled for more than 10,000 of your years." Taeho tried to process this. He was camping in the mountains with an alien princess. His life had become very strange. "Why were you flying alone?" he asked. "Where were your guards, your protectors?" Yura's face darkened. "I was running away. There are people in the Empire who want my sister dead. They want to destroy our family completely and take power for themselves. They sent killers after me." "The crash," Taeho said, understanding now. "It wasn't an accident. No. My ship was damaged by their weapons. I fled through space, trying to escape, but my navigation system was broken. I did not choose to come here. Your world is not part of the Empire. It is not even known to most species. When I crashed, I thought I would die alone on a primitive planet, where no one would ever find me." Taeho felt a small sting at the word primitive, but he pushed it aside. "Can't you call your sister? Tell her you're alive?" Yura shook her head sadly. "The machine that sends messages across space was destroyed in the crash. My sister thinks I am dead. Everyone thinks I am dead. Everyone. Then we need to fix the machine. It cannot be fixed with the tools on this world. The materials do not exist here. And even if they did, I do not have the knowledge to repair such technology. I am a princess, not an engineer." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled softly between them. Above, the stars seemed colder and more distant than they had before. Taeho now knew that somewhere among those tiny points of light, there were thousands of worlds full of people, civilizations that humanity knew nothing about. "What will you do?" he asked quietly. "I do not know," Yura admitted. "Perhaps I will stay here forever. Hide among your people. If I can disguise myself. Live a quiet life until I die. Is that what you want?" Yura looked at him. And in her violet eyes, Taeho saw sadness deeper than anything he had ever known. "What I want does not matter," she said. "I have no choices left." Taeho thought about that. He thought about his own life, the choices he had made. He had chosen solitude because it was easy, because it meant he never had to try, never had to fail, never had to be hurt. "There's always a choice," he said finally. "Even if it doesn't seem like it." Yura studied his face for a long moment. "You are a strange human, Park Taeho. I have studied many species in my life. Most creatures, when they find something weak and helpless, they take advantage. They use. They consume. But you found me dying, and you gave me your food, your medicine, your warmth. You have given me everything and asked for nothing. That's just what people do, Tejo said, uncomfortable with the praise. No, Yura said firmly. It is not what people do. It is not what anyone does. On any world I have visited. What you did was rare. What you are is rare. She reached out and touched his hand gently. Her skin was cool and smooth, like touching polished stone. I do not know what will happen to me, she said. But I will not forget what you have done. Whatever time I have left, I will remember the human who was kind to me, when no one else in the universe could be. Tejo felt his face grow warm. He looked away, toward the fire, because he did not know what else to do. You should sleep, he said awkwardly. Yura smiled. A small but genuine smile. Yes, I will sleep. But tomorrow, will you show me more of your world? The trees, the water, the birds you photograph? Okay, Tejo said. I'll show you. That night, as Yura slept peacefully by the dying fire, Tejo lay awake and watched the stars. He thought about princesses and empires, about assassins and crashed spaceships, about the strange path that had brought this alien woman into his ordinary life. He thought about the future, and for the first time in many years, he realized he was not afraid of it. 2 weeks had passed since the crash. Yura was stronger now, able to walk short distances and even help with small tasks around the camp. Her wounds were healing well, though the scars would remain forever. Tejo had taught her how to catch fish, how to cook over an open fire, how to identify which plants were safe to eat. She learned everything quickly, with a hunger for knowledge that never seemed satisfied. They had fallen into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for exploring the nearby forest. Afternoons were for rest and conversation. Evenings were for watching the sunset and talking about their different worlds. Tejo told her about Earth, about human history, about the cities and oceans and deserts she had never seen. Yura told him about the Celestine Empire, about worlds made entirely of crystal, about ships that could cross galaxies in moments. It was peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Tejo should have known it could not last. He woke suddenly in the middle of the night, pulled from sleep by a hand shaking his shoulder violently. Yura's face appeared above him, pale with terror, her violet eyes wide and wild. They found me, she whispered. We have to run. Now. Tejo sat up immediately, his body responding before his mind fully understood. Through the trees, he saw lights moving in the darkness. Not the warm yellow glow of flashlights, but cold blue lights that seemed to float through the air on their own. How many? He asked, already grabbing his backpack. I don't know. Many. They have technology that can track my blood, my DNA. I thought I was safe here, but they must have followed the trail from my ship. There was no time to take the tent or most of their supplies. Tejo grabbed only the essentials, his knife, his first aid kit, a single bottle of water, and pulled Yura away from the camp just as the first light came over the ridge behind them. What followed was the most terrifying night of Tejo's life. The assassins moved through the forest like ghosts. They made almost no sound, and their lights seemed to see through everything. Through trees, through rocks, through the darkness itself. Tejo heard strange humming sounds behind them, and once, a beam of red light shot past his head and struck a tree, vaporizing a section of the trunk in an instant. They had weapons that could destroy matter itself. Against that kind of power, Tejo had nothing but his knowledge of these mountains. It would have to be enough. He led Yura down steep ravines that he knew the assassins would struggle to navigate. He took them through streams to mask their trail. He circled back through dense brush that would confuse any tracking device. His years of wilderness experience became their only advantage, but the assassins were persistent. Every time Tejo thought they had lost them, the blue lights appeared again in the distance. Every time they stopped to rest, the humming of alien technology grew closer. By midnight, Yura was exhausted. She could barely walk, her healing body pushed far beyond its limits. Teho half carried her through the darkness, refusing to leave her behind even as his own strength faded. "Leave me," Yura gasped. "They want me, not you. You can escape." "Shut up," Teho said. "You will die. Then I'll die. But I'm not leaving you." They reached the abandoned mine shaft around 2 in the morning. Teho had discovered it years ago during a photography trip, an old entrance to a mining complex that had been closed for decades. The tunnel went deep into the mountain, with multiple branches and collapsed sections that made it a maze even for someone who knew it well. He pulled Yura inside and led her through the darkness by memory alone. Behind them, he heard the assassins enter the mine, their blue lights casting strange shadows on the rocky walls. Teho's plan was desperate and probably insane, but it was the only plan he had. He found the section he was looking for, a place where the ceiling was supported by old wooden beams that had been rotting for 50 years. He positioned Yura in a small side tunnel, behind a wall of rock that would protect her from what came next. "Stay here," he said. "Don't move, no matter what happens." "What are you doing?" Teho didn't answer. He took his knife and began cutting at the wooden supports. The assassins found him a minute later. He saw their shapes in the darkness, tall and thin, with armor that reflected their own blue lights. They raised their weapons, those terrible weapons that could vaporize flesh and stone. Teho cut the last support and threw himself toward Yura's hiding place. The ceiling came down. The sound was enormous, a roaring thunder of stone and wood that seemed to shake the entire mountain. Dust filled the air so thick that Teho couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except the continuing crash of falling rock. Something heavy struck his back, and he felt ribs crack under the impact. He covered Yura with his body, protecting her from the debris that rained down around them. Pain exploded through his entire being, so intense that he thought he would pass out. Then, silence. Teho lay still for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to discover what damage had been done. Finally, he forced himself to check on Yura. She was conscious, covered in dust, but unharmed. The side tunnel had protected her from the worst of the collapse. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Teho tried to move and gasped in pain. "Broken ribs. Maybe 3. But I'll live." "The assassins?" Teho looked toward where the main tunnel had been. There was nothing but a wall of solid rock. Tons of stone blocked the passage completely. "Buried," he said. "Or they escaped back the way they came. Either way, they can't reach us now." They waited until dawn before attempting to leave. The mine had other exits, smaller ones that Teho had mapped years ago. He led Yura through the darkness, moving slowly because every breath sent fire through his broken ribs. The pain was constant and terrible, but he kept moving. There was no other choice. When they finally emerged into the morning sunlight, Yura stopped and stared at him. "You could have died," she said quietly. "Yes. You knew the ceiling might kill you too." "Yes. Why would you risk your life for me?" Teho thought about the question. The honest answer was that he didn't know. He had acted on instinct, on something deeper than logic or reason. "Because it was the right thing to do," he finally said. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." Yura continued to stare at him. There was something new in her violet eyes now, something Teho couldn't identify. Respect, perhaps, or wonder, or something else entirely. "In my 200 years of life," she said slowly, "I have met warriors from 100 worlds. I have seen soldiers with the best weapons and the most advanced armor the Empire can create. But I have never met anyone like you, Park Tae-ho." She reached out and gently touched his face. "You killed trained Imperial assassins with nothing but rocks and dirt and your own will to survive. You protected me when anyone else would have run. You are the most dangerous creature I have ever met, and you don't even know it." Tae-ho wanted to argue, to say that he was just an ordinary man who took pictures of birds. But the words wouldn't come, because somewhere deep inside, he knew she was right. He wasn't ordinary anymore. he never would be again. 3 days after the battle in the mine, Yura finally managed to repair her ship's communication device. It wasn't a complete repair, just enough to send a single short message into space. A message that contained her location and a code that only her sister would recognize. Teiho watched her work, sitting against a tree because his broken ribs made standing painful. His entire torso was wrapped in bandages, and every breath reminded him of the price he had paid in that dark tunnel. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked. "No," Yura admitted. "The signal is weak. It might take days to reach anyone who can understand it. It might never reach anyone at all. And if it does work, what happens then?" Yura hesitated before answering. "Then my sister will come, and everything will change." Teiho nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come eventually. Yura couldn't stay on Earth forever, hiding in the mountains with a wildlife photographer. She had a life somewhere among the stars, a family, responsibilities, a whole universe waiting for her. He had just hoped it would take a little longer. The answer came 3 days later. Teiho was sleeping when the sound woke him, a deep humming that seemed to vibrate in his bones. He opened his eyes and saw the sky had turned strange. The afternoon sun was still shining, but directly above their camp, the blue sky had been replaced by something else, a circle of darkness that grew larger with each passing second. "It's her," Yura said quietly. "My sister has come." The ship that descended through the opening was larger than anything Teiho had ever imagined. It was bigger than a mountain, bigger than any building, a massive structure of white and silver that blocked out the sun and cast the entire forest into shadow. Lights pulsed along its surface, thousands of them, like the windows of a floating city. Teiho stood slowly, ignoring the pain in his ribs. His heart was pounding so hard, he could feel it in his throat. The ship stopped about a kilometer above them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a beam of light descended from its underside, and figures began to appear on the ground, materializing from nothing like ghosts becoming solid. There were soldiers first, dozens of them, wearing armor that gleamed like liquid metal. They spread out in a perfect circle, their weapons raised, their faces hidden behind helmets. Behind them came servants in flowing robes, carrying objects Teiho couldn't identify. And finally, at the center of it all, came the Queen herself. Queen Nari was the most impressive person Teiho had ever seen. She was tall, taller than Yura by at least a head, and her presence seemed to fill the entire clearing. Her hair was silver white, flowing down her back like moonlight, and her eyes were the same violet as her sister's, but somehow colder, harder, older. She moved toward Yura with long, graceful steps, her expression unreadable. "Sister," she said, her voice musical but heavy with emotion. "I thought you were dead. For 3 weeks, I mourned you. I prepared your funeral. I wept for you." Yura stepped forward and embraced her. "I'm sorry. I couldn't contact you. Everything was destroyed in the crash. I know. We found what remained of your ship. When we saw the damage, we were certain you couldn't have survived." Nari pulled back and examined her sister carefully. "You are injured, scarred. What happened to you on this world?" "I was hunted. The assassins followed me here, but I survived because of him." Both sisters turned to look at Teiho. He suddenly felt very small and very human. These were beings from an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. Creatures who had technology that could move mountains and cross galaxies. And he was just a man with broken ribs and dirt on his clothes. One of the soldiers stepped forward and grabbed Teiho's arm roughly, pulling him toward the Queen. Another soldier produced a device that began to glow, scanning his body. "What is this creature?" Nari asked, studying him like he was an interesting insect. "He's human," Yura said quickly. "His name is Park Teiho. He found me after the crash. He healed my wounds, fed me, protected me. He saved my life, Nari. Several times." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "A primitive saved a princess of the Celestine line?" He is not primitive. He is different. Yes, his world is young, his species is young, but he has qualities that I have never seen in any other being, anywhere. Nari was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Teho's face. He met her eyes without flinching, though every instinct told him to look away, to show respect, to bow before this obvious power. "Bring him aboard," the queen finally said. The soldiers began to drag Teho toward the beam of light. "Wait." Yura stepped between them. "He is not a prisoner. He is my protector, my friend. You will treat him with respect." "He has seen too much," one of the soldiers said. "Protocol demands we contain any contact with unregistered species. Protocol can burn," Yura said fiercely. "This man broke 3 ribs protecting me. He killed Imperial assassins with nothing but rocks and his own hands. He stayed with me when he could have escaped alone. If anyone touches him without respect, they answer to me." The soldiers looked to the queen, uncertain. Nari studied her sister's face for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "Remove his restraints," she commanded. "The princess is right. This human will be treated as a guest, not a prisoner." The soldiers immediately released Teho and stepped back. He rubbed his wrists, surprised by the sudden change. The queen approached him directly now, stopping only an arm's length away. This close, Teho could see that she was ancient, far older than she appeared. There was weight in her eyes, the weight of centuries, of decisions that had affected billions of lives. "You saved my sister," Nari said, her Korean perfect and formal. "This is a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Name your reward." "Park Teho. Wealth beyond anything your world has seen, technology that would advance your civilization by centuries, a position of honor in my empire?" Teho thought about the question. A month ago, he would have been overwhelmed by such offers. A month ago, he was just a lonely photographer, with no ambition and no purpose. But a month ago, he hadn't met Yura. "I don't want wealth," he said slowly. "I don't want power. I just want to go home. And," he hesitated, "I want to know that Yura will be okay, that she'll be safe." The queen's expression shifted. Something passed through her eyes, something Teho couldn't identify. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity, or something deeper. "You ask for nothing for yourself," she said quietly. "You ask only to go home and for my sister's well-being." "Yes." Nari turned to look at Yura, then back at Teho. A small smile crossed her face, so brief that Teho almost missed it. "How interesting," she murmured. "How very, very interesting." She turned away and began walking toward the beam of light. "Come," she called over her shoulder. "Both of you. We have much to discuss." Teho followed, his heart heavy with uncertainty. He had asked to go home, but as he walked toward the light that would carry him into an alien ship, he realized he wasn't sure where home was anymore, or if it even mattered. The interior of Queen Nari's ship was more beautiful than anything Teho had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of light itself, glowing with soft colors that shifted constantly. The floors were smooth as glass, but warm under his feet. Music played somewhere in the distance, strange and haunting, unlike any sound from Earth. Servants guided him to a room where other servants waited to bathe him, dress him in clean clothes, and treat his injuries. The medical treatment was miraculous. A device was placed against his ribs, and within minutes, the pain began to fade. Within an hour, his bones were completely healed. When the servants were finished, Teho barely recognized himself in the mirror. His wild hair had been trimmed and styled. His rough skin had been cleaned and softened. He wore clothes of a material he couldn't identify, silver gray and flowing, impossibly comfortable. He looked like a different person. He felt like a different person. A servant led him through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past hundreds of rooms and thousands of beings who stopped to stare at him as he passed. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the ship. Inside, a table had been set for 3, covered with foods and drinks from worlds Tejo could never have imagined. Queen Nari sat at the head of the table. She gestured for him to sit across from her. "Eat," she said. "You must be hungry after your ordeal." Tejo sat cautiously. He looked at the strange foods before him and didn't know where to begin. "The blue fruit is sweet," Nari said. "The red meat is similar to what you call beef. The golden drink is safe for humans. I had my doctors research your biology before you came." Tejo tasted the blue fruit carefully. It was indeed sweet, sweeter than anything he had ever eaten, like concentrated joy in solid form. "Thank you," he said. Nari nodded slightly. "You earned it. My sister has told me everything. The crash, the healing, the assassins, the mine. You did extraordinary things, Park Tejo. Things that trained warriors from my own empire might have failed to do. I just did what I had to do." "No. You did far more than that." Nari leaned forward, her violet eyes intense. "I have ruled the Celestine Empire for 400 years. In that time, I have met countless beings from countless worlds. I have seen every form of courage, every type of strength, every variety of intelligence. But I have rarely seen anyone like you." Tejo didn't know how to respond to that, so he stayed silent. "Let me explain something to you," Nari continued. "The assassination attempt on my sister was not random. It was part of a larger plan to destabilize my rule. There are factions within the empire who believe my family has held power for too long. They want to replace us with someone more agreeable to their interests." "So you're in a war?" "Not openly. Not yet. But the threat is real. If my enemies see weakness, they will attack. And right now, they see weakness everywhere. My fleet is spread thin across 1,000 worlds. My treasury is depleted from centuries of expansion. And my sister, my only family, was almost killed by assassins who should never have gotten close to her." Nari paused, her expression calculating. "What I need is a symbol. A story. Something that will make my enemies think twice before they move against me." Tejo felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of symbol?" "Consider this," Nari said slowly. "A princess of the Celestine Empire crashes on an unknown world. She is helpless, dying, hunted by assassins, and she is saved. Not by an army, not by technology, not by any power the Empire possesses, but by a single, primitive warrior from an uncontacted planet. A warrior who kills trained killers with nothing but rocks and his bare hands. A warrior who faces impossible odds and wins through sheer determination." She smiled, cold and beautiful. "That is a story, Park Tejo. That is a symbol. And symbols have power. What are you asking me?" "I am asking you to marry my sister." Tejo choked on the golden drink he had been sipping. He coughed violently, struggling to breathe, while Nari waited patiently. "Marry?" he finally managed to say. "Not a real marriage. Not at first. A political arrangement. You would become prince consort of the Celestine Empire. You would appear at ceremonies, attend meetings, stand beside Yura at official functions. Your presence would send a message to our enemies. It would say that we have allies they know nothing about. It would say that humans, this unknown warrior race from an uncontacted world, are now connected to the royal family. And what would I actually have to do? Very little, at first. Learn our customs. Learn our language. Appear when you are needed. The rest of your time would be your own. And Earth? What happens to my world? 1. R1. Nari's smile widened. Earth would receive our protection. No species would be allowed to harm or exploit your planet. In time, when your people are ready, we would introduce you to the galactic community. You would have technology, knowledge, opportunities beyond anything you could achieve alone. All because one human was in the right place, at the right time. Tejo sat in silence, trying to process what he was hearing. The queen of an interstellar empire was offering him marriage to a princess, power beyond imagination, and the protection of his entire species. It was insane. It was impossible. And yet, some part of him was actually considering it. "Why me?" he asked finally. "You could find anyone. You could fake a hero, create a story that never happened. Why do you need me specifically?" Nari's expression softened slightly, and for the first time, Tejo saw something human in her ancient eyes. "Because the story is true," she said quietly. "Because you actually did save my sister. Because she has not stopped speaking about you since I arrived. Because in 200 years, she has refused every suitor I have ever presented to her. But when I mentioned this idea, she agreed immediately." She paused. "I am asking you because my sister wants you, Park Tejo. Not a symbol, not a tool, not a political arrangement. You. And I love my sister enough to give her what she wants, even if it means giving her a human." Tejo stared at the queen, his mind spinning. "I need time to think," he said. Nari raised an eyebrow. "Time? Yes. I can't make a decision like this in 5 minutes. I need to think about what it means. For me, for Yura, for Earth." The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a genuine laugh of surprise. "You are extraordinary," she said. "Any other being in the universe would have agreed instantly. Power, wealth, a princess for a wife. But you ask for time." She stood and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect that Tejo somehow knew was extremely rare. "You have 1 day," she said. "Consider carefully. And talk to my sister. She is waiting for you. 1 day, 8, ND4. With that, the queen turned and left the chamber, leaving Tejo alone with his impossible choice. 1 day to decide the fate of worlds. 1 day to figure out what he truly wanted. Tejo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had never been good at making decisions. But this time, he had no choice but to try. Tejo found Yura in a garden at the center of the ship. It was a real garden, somehow, with real trees and real flowers growing under a sky that looked exactly like Earth's sky, but was somehow made of light and technology. A small stream ran through the center, and birds sang in the branches above, species Tejo had never seen before. Yura sat on a bench beside the stream, wearing a dress of flowing white material that made her look more like a princess than she ever had in the mountains. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style, decorated with small crystals that sparkled as she moved. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes lit with something that might have been hope, or fear, or both. "You spoke with my sister," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Tejo sat beside her on the bench, leaving a small space between them. "She told me about her plan, about the marriage. And what do you think?" Tejo watched the water flow past for a moment before answering. "I think it's insane. I think it's impossible. I think I would be crazy to agree." Yura's face fell slightly. "I understand. Of course you would refuse. Why would you give up your life to help someone you barely know? Why would you—" "I didn't say I was refusing." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at him with wide violet eyes. "What?" "I said it's insane and impossible. I didn't say I wouldn't do it." Tejo turned to face her fully. "But before I decide anything, I need to understand something. Your sister said you agreed to this plan immediately. She said you wanted it. Is that true?" Yura was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "My sister's offer is political. She sees you as a symbol, a tool to strengthen our position against our enemies. She is not wrong. Your story would be powerful, but that is not why I agreed." Then why? Yura looked away, toward the artificial sky above. I am 200 years old, Teho. I have lived longer than your civilization has had written language. I have seen things you cannot imagine. Met beings from worlds so strange, they would break your mind to comprehend. And in all that time, in all those experiences, no one has ever made me feel the way you do. How do I make you feel? Safe. She turned back to him, her eyes glistening with something that might have been tears. In my whole life, I have never felt safe. Not as a princess, not as a target, not as a piece in my sister's political games. There has always been danger, always been threat, always been someone waiting for a chance to hurt me or use me. She reached out and took his hand gently. But when I was dying in that forest, when I woke up and saw your face, I knew I was safe. I cannot explain it. I cannot rationalize it. I simply knew, in some deep part of myself, that you would never hurt me, that you would protect me no matter what, that I could trust you completely. Teho felt his heart beating faster. Yura, you barely know me. We spent 3 weeks together in the mountains. That's not enough time to... I know everything I need to know. Her grip on his hand tightened. I know that when the assassins came, you could have escaped alone. You stayed. I know that when the mine was collapsing, you covered my body with yours. I know that when my sister offered you wealth and power, you asked only for my safety. She moved closer to him on the bench. Tell me about your life on Earth, she said. Tell me what I would be asking you to give up. Trasin, Teho thought about it. He thought about his small apartment in Busan, the one with the leaky faucet and the view of a parking lot. He thought about the convenience store kimbap he ate alone most nights. He thought about his estranged family, the phone calls he never made, the holidays he spent by himself. I have a small apartment, he said slowly. I take pictures of birds and mountains for magazines that barely pay me. I eat cheap food and sleep on an old mattress. I haven't talked to my parents in 3 years because I don't know what to say to them. He paused. I have nothing, Yura. No one. My life is empty. I chose solitude because it was easy, because it meant I didn't have to try, didn't have to risk getting hurt. I told myself I was happy, but I was just existing, going through the motions, waiting for something without knowing what I was waiting for. Yura squeezed his hand. And what do you feel now? Teho met her eyes. In them, he saw his own reflection. And behind that, something vast and deep, an emotion that scared him more than any assassin ever could. I feel awake, he said quietly. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually alive. They sat in silence for a long moment, hands intertwined, listening to the artificial birds sing their alien songs. If I do this, Teho finally said, if I agree to your sister's plan, I have conditions. What conditions? First, Earth is not to be treated as a primitive backwater. When the time comes for contact, my people will be approached as equals, not inferiors. No exploitation, no manipulation, no treating us like children who need guidance. Agreed. Second, I will learn your customs and your language, but I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm human. That's not going to change. I would never ask you to change. And third, Teho took a deep breath. If this marriage happens, it has to be real. Not a political arrangement. Not a show for your enemies. Real. I won't pretend to love you while secretly wishing I was somewhere else. Either we do this truly, or we don't do it at all. Yura stared at him, her violet eyes shimmering. A single tear ran down her silver-touched cheek. You would want that? She whispered. A real marriage? With me? I don't know what the future holds, Teho admitted. I don't know if we're compatible, if we can make it work, if I'll even survive in your world. But I know that these last few weeks have been the most meaningful of my entire life. I know that when I look at you, I feel something I've never felt before, and I know that I'd rather try and fail than never try at all." He reached up and gently wiped the tear from her cheek. "So yes, Princess Yura of the Celestine Empire, I will marry you. Not because your sister asked me to. Not because it will help your political situation. I'll marry you because somewhere in those mountains, between the crash and the assassins and the pain, I fell in love with an alien who taught me that the universe is bigger than I ever imagined." Yura laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy that seemed to make the whole garden brighter. "You are the strangest human," she said. "You are the strangest being I have ever met. Is that a yes?" "Yes." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that felt ancient and sacred. "Yes, Park Taeho. 1,000 times. Yes." Above them, the artificial sky began to shift colors, painting the garden in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in the ship, Taeho imagined Queen Nari, smiling. Everything had changed. Everything was about to change again. But for this one moment, in this impossible garden, on this impossible ship, two beings from different worlds held hands and believed that love was possible, even across the stars. The wedding was held 6 months later on the capital world of the Celestine Empire, a planet of crystal towers and floating gardens where the very air seemed to sing with ancient power. Representatives from over 1,000 worlds attended, beings of every shape and size imaginable, all gathered to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. A human was marrying into the Celestine royal family. Taeho stood at the altar in ceremonial armor that had been forged specifically for him, silver and white with the royal crest emblazoned across his chest. His Korean was no longer the only language he spoke. Over the past months, he had learned Celestine, the formal tongue of the empire, along with 3 other languages that were necessary for diplomatic functions. He had also learned to fight, not with guns or technology, but with blades and his bare hands. Traditional combat that the Celestine valued above all other forms of warfare. His instructors had been surprised by how quickly he adapted, how his body seemed made for violence in ways that most civilized species had lost long ago. Humans, they discovered, were built for conflict. Evolution had shaped them on a world of constant struggle, of predators and competition and survival. Where other species saw danger and fled, humans saw challenge and attacked. It was terrifying. It was also, in its own way, beautiful. Now, as music filled the air and 1 billion viewers across the galaxy watched the ceremony broadcast, Taeho watched Yura walk toward him down an aisle of pure light. She was magnificent. Her dress seemed to be made of starlight itself, flowing and shifting around her like a living thing. Her dark hair was arranged with crystals that caught every beam of light and reflected them into rainbows. And her eyes, those violet eyes that had first looked at him with fear and confusion in a forest on Earth, now looked at him with nothing but love. They spoke their vows in both Celestine and Korean, a mixing of languages that symbolized the mixing of their worlds. Taeho promised to protect her, to honor her, to stand beside her through whatever storms might come. Yura promised the same. When they kissed, the crowd erupted into sounds that Taeho's human ears could barely process. Cheers and songs and vibrations that seemed to shake the very foundation of the planet. He was now Prince Consort Park Taeho of the Celestine Empire. The human who had saved a princess with nothing but kindness was now one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. In the months and years that followed, the enemies of the royal family learned why Queen Nari had smiled when she proposed this marriage. The first assassination attempt came 3 months after the wedding. A group of rebels infiltrated the palace, killing guards and disabling security systems with technology that should have been unstoppable. They found Prince Taeho waiting for them. He killed 7 of them before the palace guards even arrived. Not with advanced weapons, not with technology, but with a blade and his bare hands and the ruthless efficiency that humans had spent millions of years perfecting. The surviving assassins surrendered immediately, terrified of the creature that had torn through their ranks like they were made of paper. The story spread across the empire within days. The human prince had single-handedly stopped an assassination attempt. The primitive from the uncontacted world had proven more deadly than entire squads of trained killers. No one laughed at Earth after that. The second test came a year later, when a hostile fleet threatened one of the Empire's outer colonies. Queen Nari sent diplomatic envoys to negotiate. She also sent Teho. He stood before the enemy commanders, unarmed and unafraid, and spoke calmly about the consequences of war. He spoke about Earth, about human history, about the millions of wars his species had fought over thousands of years. He spoke about nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and biological weapons. He spoke about the horror that humans could unleash when pushed to their limits. Then he smiled and said that he was the nice one, the patient one, the peaceful one. He suggested that the enemy commanders imagine what would happen if they ever gave humanity a reason to stop being nice. The fleet withdrew within the hour. 10 years passed. Then 20. Then 50. Teho aged, as humans did. But Celestine medicine slowed the process dramatically. He would not live as long as Yura or Nari, but he would live longer than any human had ever lived before. He used that time wisely. He established relations between Earth and the Empire, guiding his homeworld through its first contact with the galactic community. He made sure that humans were treated as equals. Just as he had demanded, he watched as his species spread out among the stars, bringing their strange mix of violence and compassion to worlds that had never known anything like them. And through it all, he stayed by Yura's side. They had children, impossible children that the scientists said should not exist. Blends of human and Celestine DNA that created something new. Their son had Teho's determination and Yura's grace. Their daughter had Yura's intelligence and Teho's stubbornness. The royal line continued, stronger than ever. In his old age, Teho gave an interview to a historian who was writing a book about the human phenomenon, the strange rise of Earth, from an unknown backwater to one of the most respected civilizations in the galaxy. The historian asked him many questions about politics and warfare and diplomacy. But the last question was different. What made humans different? The historian asked. What quality allowed your species to achieve so much in such a short time? Teho thought about it for a long moment. He thought about the night he had found Yura's crashed ship, about the choice he had made to help a stranger instead of running away. He thought about the mine, about the collapsing ceiling, about the broken ribs he had earned protecting someone who wasn't even his species. The universe is full of species who ask, "What can I gain?" He finally said. Humans ask, "What can I do?" That's the only difference. But it turns out to be a big one. The historian nodded and wrote down his answer. Later that night, Teho sat in the garden with Yura, the same garden where they had decided to marry all those years ago. They were both older now, their hair touched with gray, their movements slower than they once were. But when Yura took his hand, it felt exactly the same as it had on that first night. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Leaving Earth? Giving up your old life?" Teho smiled. "My old life was empty. I was alone, going nowhere, waiting for something I couldn't name. Then a spaceship crashed in the mountains, and everything changed." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't regret a single moment. Not the pain, not the danger, not the years of learning how to be a prince when I still felt like a wildlife photographer. Because all of it led me here. All of it led me to you." Yura leaned against his shoulder, her eyes closed. "I love you, Park Teho," she murmured. "My strange human. My impossible husband. My prince. I marked. I love you too," Teho said. "My alien princess. My unexpected gift. My home." Above them, the stars shone bright and eternal. A universe full of wonders waiting to be discovered. And somewhere among those stars, on a small blue planet called Earth, a new generation of humans was growing up, knowing that they were not alone, that they never had been, and that sometimes all it takes to change the universe is one person willing to help a stranger in need. The story of Park Tae-ho became legend. It was told on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000 languages, to children who would grow up dreaming of humans and their strange, wonderful ways. But to those who knew him best, he was never a legend. He was just a man who loved his wife and did his best. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything.